For more than 3 decades, an ice-preserved figure of the Alps has fascinated scientists, historians, and onlookers around the world, Ötzi, the Iceman. Discovered in 1991 by two walkers who ventured into the mountains of Tyrol on the border between Austria and Italy, his body partially appeared after the melting of a glacier. What seemed at first glance a missing modern climber was revealed a unique archaeological treasure, a human being who had lived for over 5,000 years, frozen in time with clothing, tools, weapons, and even remains of his last meal. The preservation was so extraordinary that details of his daily life could be rebuilt almost as if he had just fallen into the snow. Thorough exams showed that he carried signs of chronic diseases such as arthritis on his knees and hips, intestinal parasites that should cause constant discomfort, as well as evidence that he suffered from Lyme's disease. Its teeth had strong wear, a reflection of a hard diet full of fiber and abrasive particles. Still, Ötzi was not just a weakened body, he was equipped as a true Alps survivor. His clothing included a braided vegetable fiber cover, goat leather pants, coat made of sewn skins, and even shoes built with several layers of materials, designed to support damp and stony land. He carried an unfinished arc, a set of arrows, a wooden cable, a toolkit, and even coal containers and fungi used to light fire. His most impressive possession, however, was a copper axe, rare for his day, which showed not only the domain of metal, but also connections with exchange networks that extended to Tuscany, hundreds of kilometers from which he died. But perhaps the most dramatic aspect of its history is the way it found the end. Initially, Ötzi was believed to have died exhausted or frozen. However, later exams revealed something much darker. He had an arrow lodged on his left shoulder, which pierced a vital artery. The analyses showed that, after being hit, probably fell, was disabled and eventually received an additional blow to the head, or died slowly, frozen and alone. The scene, reconstituted by scientists, seems to leave a prehistoric tragedy. A traveler, isolated in the mountains, hunted by invisible enemies. For a long time, this was the main focus. Who was Ötzi, how he lived, what he fed on, and how he died. But there was an even bigger question that remained open. Who were the people who lived around him? Was it part of an alpine community, or was it a lonely outsider, the victim of some territorial conflict? Did your genetics look like that of the locals, or was it descended from a rare, already missing lineage? To answer these questions, scientists at the Mummy Study Institute in Bolzano have started one of the most ambitious genetic studies ever done in the region. They gathered and analyzed the DNA of 47 individuals who lived in the southern Alps between the Mesolithic and the Average Bronze Age, covering a period of almost 5,000 years, from about 6,400 to 1,300 BC. Among these, 15 belong to the same period of Ötzi, around 3,300 BC, when the age of the copper was in full development. The first result was surprising in its simplicity. Ötzi genetically seemed a typical man of the Alps of his time. Like the majority of the population, he carried about 90% of ancestry from Anatolia farmers, who had spread throughout Europe thousands of years earlier, mingling with local hunters. This ancestry explained its physical traits, such as brown eyes and dark hair, common among descendants of these early farmers. But scientists didn't stop there. By more detailing their genetic strains, the Y chromosome DNA inherited from his father and the mother's mitochondrial DNA, began to realize that Ötzi's story was not so simple. Something in him was detracting from the other alpine residents. Most men in the region shared a Y chromosome from the G2A L497 group, very common among Neolithic farmers spread over various parts of Europe. He was a typical marker of stable and patrilocal societies, where men remained in the community in which they were born, while women were married and came from outside. Ötzi, however, carried another rather rare branch called G2A Z6208. This branch was known in Neolithic populations in Germany, Spain, France, and Croatia, but hardly appeared in the Alps. And its maternal lineage was even more mysterious. Ötzi had a K1F-type mitochondrial DNA, never found in any other old or modern individual. It was as if its maternal line had completely disappeared from history without leaving descendants. This detail raised thought. provoking hypotheses. Would it be Ötzi, part of an isolated community with different origins from its neighbors? Or perhaps a descendant of migrants from another region, such as northern Italy or even Anatolia itself? What seemed at first the story of a common frozen man in time was beginning to become something larger, that of a very rare genetic lineage individual, an ancestral survivor who no longer exists in today's world. When scientists compared Ötzi's DNA with that of other individuals at the same time, something stood out screaming. He was not just an ordinary alpine peasant, despite sharing much of Anatolia's farmers' ancestry, who had migrated thousands of years earlier, bringing agriculture with it and forever changing the genetic map of Europe. Its paternal and maternal lineages destroyed radically the norm. While his contemporaries mostly carried the G2A L497 type Y chromosome, Ötzi belonged to a distinct branch, G2A Z6208, found in distant regions such as the Iberian Peninsula and Neolithic Croatia, but practically absent between the Alpine inhabitants. This already made him genetically strange within his own community, and his maternal lineage, classified as K1F, was even more intriguing. Never appeared in any other studied ancient or modern individual. It was as if his maternal family had disappeared from the face of the earth, taking with it a whole lineage. This discovery rekindled disturbing questions. Would it be Ötzi, a descendant of the last representatives of an isolated group that slowly disappeared from the Alpine region? Or would he come from afar, carrying the genetics of distant communities in the body, then to be killed in strange territory? The fact that he was found alone in the middle of Alpine, with no signs of a nearby settlement, feeds the theory that he could be a stranger, someone in transit, perhaps even persecuted. But scientists have not stopped only in DNA. They also examined the social functioning of the Alpine villages of the Copper Age. The standards revealed something clear. It was a patriarchal society. This means that men remained in their original villages, inheriting lands, animals, and traditions, while women married and came from outside. This structure explains why most men had similar Y chromosomes, while women brought a huge variety of mitochondrial DNA from different regions, carrying new strains with them. This system created relatively stable, but also closed communities in its male ties. And here comes a fascinating hypothesis. If Ötzi did not share the common lineage of local men, it could have been seen as someone out, someone who did not fully belong to the group. This, added to his violent death, raises the question: would his rare genetics play some role in his exclusion, persecution, or murder? DNA also revealed information about its appearance. Ötzi probably had brown eyes, dark hair, and intermediate skin. He was lactose intolerant, like all the others of his time, which shows that the habit of consuming milk had not yet spread in the Alpine region. Its final diet, identified in stomach fragments, included horny goat, deer, processed wheat, and even ferns leaves, which could have served as emergency food or even rudimentary medicinal treatment. But perhaps the greatest revelation is not just in your body, but in your personal effects. Its copper axe, whose origin was tracked to Minas de Tuscany, proves that even in such a remote time there were already transcontinental exchange routes. Along with this, other archaeological evidence shows that they circulated through the Amber region from the Baltic and obsidian from the Mediterranean. This completely transforms the image of the Alps. Far from being just an isolated refuge, they were a true knot of interconnections, where goods, ideas, and even people traded through routes that connected north to southern Europe. Still, Ötzi's death remains wrapped in mystery. Would it have been the victim of an ambush during a commercial trip? Had anyone attacked him for political, territorial, or ritual reasons? Or, as some suggest, was a simpler conflict, a personal fight that ended in tragedy? Its very rare genetic lineage adds even more weight to these theories, suggesting that it could have carried a different identity in itself, perhaps even malice, within increasingly homogeneous communities. Centuries after his death, the fate of the Alps would change dramatically. Around 2400 BC, new human groups arrived from the vast European steppes, bringing with horses, bronze weapons, and a new genetic signature known as the ancestry of the ESFPES. This migration, which changed the genetic map of all Europe, also left its brand in the Alps. Individuals studied from later periods show even a third of this ancestry, something that would forever change the composition of the local population. Ötzi, however, did not live this transformation. He belonged to an earlier era, a Europe in which Anatolian farmers still genetically and culturally dominated, where copper metallurgy took the first steps, and in which alpine communities lived in relative isolation. This makes him even more unique. He was frozen precisely on the threshold of a transition, keeping in his body the portrait of a world that was about to disappear. And that is exactly why Ötzi continues to fascinating. He is not only an individual preserved by chance, but a symbol of a lost lineage, an echo of ancestors who have not reached the present. Its loneliness in the mountains may not have been physical, but also genetic and cultural. He perhaps was literally the last representative of a forgotten village. Today, more than 5,000 years later, your body still provokes us questions that we could not fully answer. Who exactly killed him? Why? What did your genetic difference represent to your contemporaries? Was he a traveling trader, a leader, an exile, or just an ordinary man in extraordinary circumstances? What we know is that each new analysis, every sample of DNA extracted, each technology that comes, brings us closer to unraveling not only its history, but also the history of prehistoric Europe as a whole. And it reminds us of something fundamental. The past is not dead. It continues to speak through the bones, the ice, and the blood preserved in time. And now, I want to hear you. Was Ötzi the last of a forgotten lineage, or just an unlucky traveler caught by fate? Leave your opinion in the comments. And if you like this prehistory dive, be sure to enjoy the video, subscribe to the channel, and activate notifications, because here we will continue to explore the most amazing and mysterious stories of humanity. Also share with friends who like archaeology and science, because the more people reflect on these puzzles, the further we will come in search of the answers.